Greetings, everybody. This is Christopher Messina coming at you from the Messy Time Studios. We got a special edition today, wherein I am reading some choice selections from my recent book, Messina's Federal Budget. This is from Chapter 18, wherein I describe how we're going to modify, for the benefit of us all, the Department of Health and Human Services. I kick in a little bit further into the chapter about the catch-all phrase of Obamacare and what that really meant and what the promulgators of that law actually meant, which had, surprise, surprise, nothing whatsoever to do with healthcare. Let's get at it, shall we? So this is about the centralizing politician power grab myths about healthcare costs. There are a few people who benefit from the insane rat's nest of stupid rules and regulations standing between you, the American citizen, and a person, say a doctor, from whom you would like to receive, I don't know, let's call it health care. You and your doctor are not among them. The toady apologists for the centralized and totalitarian statists like Paul Krugman tell us that emergent properties of our terrible system are not things that can be fixed, but are somehow fixed in place by the hand of God Almighty. Things like insurance companies standing between patients and doctors. Things like pharmaceutical formularies, which are massive bureaucracies adding a layer of cost between drug manufacturers and insurance companies, long before anything gets to you. Krugman will tell you that we quote-unquote need insurance companies because medical costs rise over time. Did you catch the core error there? He posits as a given costs will rise, but he does not say why or how that price inflation occurs. His very description of why health insurance is necessary to pay for medical costs is wrong. He posits that because health costs are so high, the only way to pay for them is via complicated insurance run by the government, either in whole or in part via regulation. But to take a similar example, it's like saying because someone might get into a catastrophic car crash, the only way to pay for maintaining and running a car is via insurance. Can you imagine how much more cumbersome and expensive it would be to fill up your gas tank or get your oil changed if you had to present a car insurance card to the gas station before services? Automobile insurance exists to protect against extreme events, not to pay for your weekly gas or oil filter change. There are numerous competitive options if you want to shop around for the best price quality combination for brake realignment or minor repairs. Similarly, there is no need for insurance for maintaining one's car day to day. That is true for almost everything else in a free market economy. Yet Krugman and his pals, health economists, whatever the hell that might be, insist that somehow healthcare is sui generis, a wholly different thing, immune to the salutary effects of price transparency and competitive markets. He's wrong. It's better to pay for things out of pocket with complete price transparency before a doctor pokes you in the ribs and suggests an MRI, CAT scan, and a full blood panel. As part of being an operating business in America, every doctor, hospital, and everyone else in healthcare must post the price for their services or products so a customer can make an informed choice before committing to a legally binding commercial relationship. Crazy, huh? They should do what everyone else is required to do. Can you imagine if for any other interaction you bought a car or you bought groceries or you went to an accountant or a lawyer and you just engaged that person or bought that product and went home, and a month later a third party writes to you and tells you what it cost? Would you put up with that insanity for anything? No. But people have learned to suck it up when it comes to the healthcare system. We can change it, and I propose how to do it. Trump demanded price transparency, and the swamp just waited him out. I make a lot of noise, so it's quite possible President Trump heard this brilliant idea and decided to do something about it. I mean, this wacky idea of presenting prices to patients before they commit to services certainly would not have come up within the confines of Washington, D.C. He may have heard it from someone else who had the equally brilliant insight. No matter the cause, on 24 June 2019, he signed Executive Order 13877 with the heady title, Improving Price and Quality Transparency in American Healthcare to Put Patients First, demanding just that. The hospitals and insurers bitched and moaned and cried about how impossible it would be to come up with such price lists. which is odd because they're certainly able to charge people $90 for a Tylenol tablet after the pill has been swallowed. Given their ability to slap me with wildly exorbitant bills after discharge, I assumed they could just, grab the prices from somewhere and print them up before I entered the operating theater. Maybe I'm being unfair. Perhaps hospital bills are a quantum phenomenon. They exist in a perpetual state of indeterminacy, along with a probability distribution which gets perturbed the more one tries to fix it in time and space. But the moment the patient, is legally committed to pay the fee, the bill's infinite potentiality field collapses into a single reified state, which then causes the patient to faint in shock. That sounds about right. Fast forward to January 2024. Just think about all the times you've encountered a pre-service price list from the healthcare industry since President Trump signed that order into effect. Oh, right, you haven't, because they just continue to flout the law. Once again, if you work in an industry favored by a powerful political constituency, then feel free to ignore pesky little things like laws and legal executive orders. But if you, insane prepper conspiracy theorist, don't trust banks and prefer to keep $10,001 in legal tender in your home, the police and FBI can come seize it under civil forfeiture laws created under the Biden-sponsored Comprehensive Forfeiture Act of 1984, even if you were never even charged with a crime. You may wonder why I think those two things are connected, because they're all about control over you. Medicare for all, some try to call it for Obamacare, is social control, not medicine. At its heart, Obamacare was never about medicine, healthcare, or insurance at all. It is about completing totalitarian state control over every aspect of your life, dear reader. In the United Kingdom, the stories of tragic wait times and poor hospital conditions are legion. But the main fundamental flaw in the UK system, which the Obamacare train wreck is designed to bring us in the form of single-payer, one-government healthcare system, is that it literally strips away an individual's right over her body. Given how much noise the chattering classes and the pro-choice left make about a woman's right to choose, you'd think those same people would be natural enemies of a system which strips in toto the right of an individual to make his or her own healthcare decisions. But in the bizarre drop backwards through the looking glass world of Democrat Party politics, the only freedom to choose any citizen should have is discriminatory. Only half the population is allowed to choose to have an abortion. All other medical procedures are not to enjoy the same privilege or freedom of choice and control over one's body. The very logic of a single-payer, collectivist healthcare system means that your healthcare, fitness, choice to exercise, or smoke are not yours at all. They're ours in a very real, economically binding way. Once healthcare is fully socialized, the real result is that you no longer exist. You are simply a number merged into a group with no rights at all. In fact, under single-payer systems, you don't even have the right to try an experimental drug or treatment. In the U.S. currently, if you have a horrible terminal illness, which is a near-term death sentence, you can sign a liability waiver to get into an early-stage drug trial, which you are willing to do on the chance that it may be the cure you're praying for. In the United Kingdom, you are not allowed to sign up for an experimental drug. The reason why is bone-chilling. Because if you say you have 3 months to live and you take this experimental drug, that drug may extend your life 20 years, but may have severe side effects that render you, say, paraplegic, and therefore make you a burden on the socialized medicine system. A burden which you would not have been had you just died quietly, politely, and in a collectively minded way in 3 months. This kind of medical care rationing is not and cannot be, under a centralized system, limited to only experimental procedures or medicines. As of 6 April 2019, the Times of London reported that a full 2 years after being told to stop withholding cataract surgery, the National Health Service was still doing so. In a headline startling in its clarity, the paper reports that, quote, elderly go blind as NHS ignores eye surgery rationing advice, end quote. The Royal College of Ophthalmologists is appalled that because of cost cutting, the NHS wants to wait until elderly patients die before they become eligible for surgery to prevent or alleviate blindness. Canada, under the Trudeau government, is busy encouraging citizens to commit suicide if they're feeling a little down and can't pay their rent. The supposedly humane law was started to allow serious 7th standard deviation edge cases, 2 months to live, excruciating pain from late-stage liver cancer kind of situations. But in a terrifyingly short period of time, has expanded to allow teenagers whose brains are not fully formed to call this life quits with government help if, they're not feeling so positive about things just now. It saves the taxpayer money rather than treating the patient. This is the sort of cold, brutal, centralized bureaucratic decision which Americans can come to expect if Obamacare grinds to its logical conclusion of destroying the private market for medical care and insurance. The Democrats have spent and continue to spend, along with their dim-witted media allies, huge amounts of money and time poo-pooing the fake bogeyman of death panels. They rightly understand that death panels issuing the very kinds of rulings which currently prevail in the UK for experimental medicines are precisely what central single-payer socialized medicine demands. Paul Krugman, rabid Obamacare fan, along with any other socialist program proposed by anyone ever, and my favorite self-cleaning Socratic foil, in a rare moment of candor stated, quote, "Eventually we do have a problem, that the population is getting older, healthcare costs are rising. There's this question of how we're going to pay for the programs. The year 2025, the year 2030, something is going to have to give. We're going to need more revenue. Surely it will require some sort of middle-class taxes as well. We won't be able to pay for the kind of government the society will want without some increases in taxes on the middle class, maybe a value-added tax. And we're also going to have to make decisions about health care that has no demonstrated medical benefits. So the snarky version, which I shouldn't even say because it will get me in trouble, is death panels and sales taxes is how we do this." End quote. There are so many things wrong with this brief statement. To unpack its every assumption and implication is like approaching the infinite depth and layers of nuance to the most perfectly inspired haiku. Just how much significant meaning can one consistently wrong wingnut economist pack into 134 words? Let's have a stab at it, shall we? In the book, as you're reading this, you'll come to Table 6, which is labeled the exegetical interpretation of the draft dodger generation's bad ideas summed up in 134 words. Personally, a title I'm very proud of. I'm going to chunk out bits of Paul's statement I just read to you, and I'm going to give you my commentary. It may be Talmudic, it may be a bit Jesuitical, but here we go. So, first part of Paul's statement. Eventually, we do have a problem. My comment. We sure do, Paul, in the main because folks like you can't leave well enough alone. I'm betting very heavily that Paul's intention with this very clumsy, almost grammatical sentence fragment is to make some Solomonic observation about an objective state of affairs which he believes cannot be altered, but merely addressed to the very expensive advice of a pack of folks who studied the same outdated equilibrium models of economics promulgated from Samuelson onwards. We do have a problem, but not in the way Paul thinks. The problem is the way Paul thinks, because far too many horrible policies and decisions are forced on Americans because, thus far, we've permitted clowns like this to be in positions of authority. For those Americans who have been too busy to care, it's worth recalling that the only private company that ever hired Paul Krugman for his advice was Enron. Next bit of his statement. The population is getting older. My commentary. Well, for now, that appears to be the trajectory, but changes in migration patterns, birth rates, or repeated influxes of, say, innovative coronaviruses from Chinese biohazard labs could alter the demographic trends. On the positive side, once Americans wake up, shake their heads free of the bad ideas forced on us by FDR onwards, adopt the rational path forward described helpfully in this book, shameless plug, then young Americans who can once more pay for a year of college with the cash earned during the previous summer's job might start feeling optimistic about the future and start acting like busy bunnies again, in the way the greatest generation did when war-weary men came home after being feted by Gigi in Paris and Beth in London for a few sweet weeks in 1945. But if the current population distribution trajectory continues, then yes, the population in the U.S. will skew older until the boomers leave us all in peace. But leaving all of these complexities aside, the age distribution of the population is not an ironclad condition which predetermines whether the cost of anything, mobile phone service, sustainable bamboo flooring, frozen pizzas, or healthcare, will rise, fall, or stay constant over time. It is important to keep that firmly in mind because this whole folks are getting older mantra is one of the linguistic tools our political to form the subconscious impression that there is some solid, irrefutable relationship between aging people and rising medical costs. Brings us to his next quote, healthcare costs are rising. Well, as you can tell from where I'm coming from, that most assuredly need not be true, which is what Paul wants you to believe. It is true now, given decades of stupid government policy and Americans' delight in parasitic lawyers and the voters' tolerance to date of completely value-destructive and cost-additive insurance and benefits bureaucracies. And Paul ruminates, there's the question of how we're going to pay for the programs. Fascinating. Nothing in here about quality of life, the dedication and self-sacrifice of years of study it takes to become a doctor, or the dedication to purpose of the nurses that care for patients. No mention of the fact that for millions of years, human beings were born, lived, and died without ever seeing a doctor. No mention of the myriad personal choices to smoke or not, to drink heavily or not, to exercise or not, to have unprotected sex or not, that go into every individual state of health. No mention of any of the things that normal people consider when thinking of healthcare. No mention of the fact that for every single elective, out-of-pocket medical procedure not covered by insurance, prices come down while quality rises, in sharp contrast to, quote, all covered procedures whose prices do nothing but rise, rise, rise. No mention of fixing the tax code and solving the nation's addiction to unlimited credit to leave more hard dollars in people's pockets with which they can make their own medical decisions. Nope, none of that, because all those ideas diminish the authority of tin pot authoritarian nanny state brats, like Krugman. All that exists in the minds of centralized and control freaks is how we are going to pay for the collective programs which replace all individual choice with bureaucratic dictates. You've had about a decade of Obamacare thus far. How are you enjoying your health care, delivered by the same pack of fools who mismanage the DMV? Costs have been skyrocketing every year since Obama jammed through his awful lie-based takeover of 1/6 of the economy. To which his apologists and the liars who were on record declaring their whole argument for Obamacare was based on fraud and lying to the American people say, wow, but costs would have been higher without our passing this important legislation that was so important that Nancy Pelosi wanted to deem it passed without making her Democrat Congress clowns go on record as voting for it, and further was so excited to force it into law because everyone would get to find out what was in it once it was passed. I wish I were making this up. I do. Onward. The year 2025, the year 2030, something's going to have to give. Well, it's pretty fascinating, considering that we're in late 2024 now. But anyway, notice my comment, of course, to Paul's comment about it is that notice that none of these meddling clowns ever addresses current problems, which might actually have a solution. See, for example, this entire book. No, that's tough, you see, because you'll get judged in real time as to how well your prescribed solutions work. When you say in 2013 that things will be tough 12 years from now, well, that's just dandy. Beyond the long-dated reputation-protecting mechanism, you'll note that should some crisis occur between 2025 to 2030, in the minds of fellow travelers, the something that has to give can only mean higher taxes and lower quality of care. Implicit in Paul's very being is that government, control, and heavy taxation are the only solution to everything, which would be an odd trait to observe in an economist if one didn't understand that one of the three core defining characteristics of centralizing statists is a lack of irony. The other legs to their ideological stool consist of appallingly unjustified arrogance and a breathtaking amount of hypocrisy. Logically, even if one supposes some giving point in 2025, what could give could turn out to be the entire insane bureaucratic micromanaging morass that does not deliver any actual medical care and just lines the pockets of societal parasites. We could actually have the system I propose here, which is great for us dumb working stiff Americans, because it's easy to understand and based on free choice, without the controlling side of our elite superiors. Back to Paul's 134 words. We're going to need more revenue. Aha! There it is. The poisoned, decaying heart of the progressive's terrible belief system. With all these complex moving parts, age-related infirmities, innovations in medicine, innovations perhaps in philosophical approaches to aging, bad policy causing costs to rise, the default answer to every problem a good progressive perceives is to tax the living bejesus out of everyone they can focus the IRS on. But there's nothing in the Constitution anywhere else that says we the people must pay collectively for individual health care. That has been the operating assumption, and therefore the ongoing destruction of quality health care in America since the late 1960s. A dumb reality we can put the brakes on whenever we want to. So while the Krugmans of the world see aggregate statistics about the healthcare costs of 350 million people, comprising each $42 per pill aspirin administered in the hospital, or each ridiculous $275 therapeutic massage scammed out of the taxpayer by stupid laws in the People's Republic of New Yorkistan, or crystal chakra realignment in the Bay Area at $385 a pop, or the hundreds of billions of dollars stolen by Medicare and Medicaid fraud because the government can't be bothered to check that an invoice is genuine before paying it, rational people see a bloated, waste-filled, fraud-riddled system. And that's before the parasitic trial bar ambulance chasers who form a core Democrat Party donor class levying an annual tax on every single doctor in the form of malpractice insurance premiums, which costs then trickle down to each one of us who reluctantly goes for a doctor visit, which we don't need to pay for at all. We can tear down the entire stupid bloated edifice so that the proven magic of free choice in a free market economy can do what it has done in every single other area of human endeavor. Raise quality while reducing costs. So even if, from a policy perspective, one wants to keep track of aggregate expenditures in healthcare under a truly free system permitting Americans true choice, and not just in abortions, the only area of medical treatment the American left sees as holy, in medical services, those healthcare costs will decline, not rise. But all that is irrelevant, because no matter what happens to the statistics of healthcare costs, those costs, with a very few exceptions, will be paid for the way people pay for everything else, at the individual level. Also, pay close attention to the political class's constant insistence on mislabeling government tax receipts as revenue. Words matter, as we all discovered in the first quarter of 2020 when the Chinese Communist government strong-armed the misnamed World Health Organization into taking massive time and effort to insist that the whole world stop calling the Wuhan virus, which appeared in Wuhan, Hubei Province, Communist People's Republic of China, by its proper name, the Wuhan virus, which causes the Wuhan flu, and start calling it some nonsensical thing like COVID-19 instead. The American left, and therefore the media, which is mostly the same thing, in true Leninist useful idiot mode immediately, during what they thought was a scary pandemic, with real people dying, mind you, started scolding everyone that to call something by its proper name was somehow, wait for it, you guessed it, racist. The useful idiots even got a legislative champion in the form of the junior senator from California, of course, Kamala Harris, who introduced a resolution on the Senate floor condemning the use of Wuhan virus as racist. This bit of theater, pandering to the already convinced dingbat base, happening while across the way, her fellow traveler, insider trader, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was forcing the House of Representatives to repudiate 230 years of requiring in-person voting in national legislation. I digress. I told you Krugman's utterances are like a multi-layered onion of rotten ideas. Anyway, calling the productivity-draining cash stolen by the government revenue makes it sound like something productive. It's not. It's a tax and a cost of keeping the country running. Certain well-defined and constrained areas of communal concern are worth paying taxes for. Healthcare ain't one of them. But make no mistake, there's nothing productive about governmental expenditures. Back to Paul. Surely it will require some sort of middle-class taxes as well. To be fair, this phrase can be shoved into anything Paul Krugman and his ilk write. There's nothing, climate, water, poverty, propaganda, or education, shoelaces, that falls within the purview of the average American liberal, for which the answer is not a slew of new taxes on the middle class. To be fair, they always lie and say all the new taxes will fall on the rich, who already pay 60% of the nation's taxes, are adept at skirting new ones, and therefore every new tax aimed at the rich always ends up soaking the middle class, because in the words of Willie Horton, that's where the money is. Back to Paul. We won't be able to pay for the kind of government the society will want. Brr. Oh my. Is it just the boomer in him that makes him say things like this on a continuous basis? Wow, the hubris. Have you, dear reader, yet noticed the so very subtle linguistic legerdemain all these freedom thieves deployed daily from the opinion pages of New York Pravda, where Krugman spews nonsense week in, week out, to the billions of hours of constant howling on cable newsfotainment propaganda factories, to the legions of armchair social justice warriors whining behind their keyboards or dumb phone screens? The society does not have the agency capability for active transitive verbs. The society cannot want anything. The society, as an emergent property of actual individual actors, may be composed of mindless sheep, or it may prove to be composed of active, freedom-loving individual citizens who prize the words of the Declaration of Independence over the current whiny plank of some pandering politicians' give me everything for free while I suck my thumb helplessly platform. Because if active citizens vote for and demand the kind of government that I lay out in these pages, then not only can we the people pay for that kind of government, but we'll have a rising cash balance in the Treasury for years to come. A true rainy day fund to deal with those consistently appearing rare events, be they hurricanes, viruses, or the emergency cash required to sharpen the citizenry's sticks against the next socialist huckster that shows up. In this particular instance, Paul is waffling on about the healthcare market, as distinct from the practice of medicine, though he stupidly conflates the two concepts. Paul posits that the individuals who constitute our society, I know, he hates individuality, but I'm trying hard to translate his totalitarian nonsense into real-world terms my rational readers can apprehend, want a comprehensive nanny state who slaps their bottoms when they're born, coddles them literally throughout life, and then decides via death panel when to quit giving them health care lacking in demonstrated medical benefits. That slew of constant hands-on interference would indeed cost a vast amount of cash. So if the society wants such insane restriction of personal freedom and collective existence, there's not enough money in the world to pay for that insanity. Why he believes that the little people, not him, you can bet your ass, would want to be taxed at 95% and dictated to is kind of baffling. But then again, this kind of muddy thinking is part of the Krugmanian course. I leave it to you, dear reader, to ponder the myriad of philosophical difficulties presented by the idea that some faceless bureaucracy will make all these decisions for you, because you are clearly not qualified to make important medical decisions. Who then is this magically qualified class of special Americans who are capable of making medical decisions for you? Do you get to turn around and make their medical decisions for them? I think you know the answer to that rhetorical question. Back to Paul. We're coming up on the massive denouement of his 134 words. We're getting there. And we're also going to have to make decisions about health care that has no demonstrated medical benefits. Chew that one over. I'm going to repeat it. And we're also going to have to make decisions about health care that has no demonstrated medical benefits. It's typical. It's just typical. Krugman and his ilk get all hot and bothered about healthcare because it's one of the areas that politicians have stupidly allowed useless parasites like him to meddle in. Rest assured, he'd love to make across-the-board decisions about everything in your life, from which type of light bulb you're allowed to buy, how much fuel your car must consume, to which fabrics are committed, all based on whether said product or service has demonstrated benefits to you, the poor sap who thought you lived in a free country. No demonstrated medical benefits. That's a fairly bland way of saying, oh, so you've got a horrible wasting disease and there's a treatment which will extend your life another 6 months so that you can spend more time with your family, but it's really expensive and we don't want to pay for it. And if you think about it, is another 180 days really a demonstrable medical benefit? We don't think so. So no, you could die on time, please. In a free country, the individual, gasp! Can you hear the liberals fainting and panting at the gall of people in post-woke America to actively use the outdated term individual in a non-pejorative, ironic way? Sorry. In a free country, the individual makes the choice about what risks to take and which healthcare choices present the possibility of benefit to his or her life and well-being. The United States was once a nation of free individuals. A good start is for each of us to reassert the fundamental truth that in a free society is one that prizes the rights and responsibilities of individuals instead of groups based on race, amorous predilection, or any other artificial construct designed, ironically, to separate us from one another, rather than, as the squealing social justice warriors would have it, to bring us together as a nation. Here's a fun thought experiment. Paul and his cronies want to make medicine a collective concern, meaning the individual has no meaning beyond a unit of expenditure and no rights at all beyond the right to pay crazy high taxes and to be told to wait in line, hopefully long enough so that we don't have to pay for any health care at all. Logically, therefore, he should be happy to have the collective make all his health care decisions. Collectively, the nation would be better off if we were spared his incessant narcissistic bloviations. So if Paul were, say, to come down with migraines, which prevented his writing further damaging articles, while his painful migraines could be cured with caffeine and aspirin, should his agony be alleviated, society would once more be afflicted by his utterances. So we believe that an 85-cent course of treatment has no demonstrated medical benefit. No aspirin and caffeine for you, Paul. Not quite a death panel, but it sure would be fun to deliver him the news, loudly, in a brightly lit room. And here we are at the end of this. So, in Paul's words, so the snarky version, which I shouldn't even say, because it will get me in trouble, is death panels and sales taxes how we do this. I can't improve on that at all. I'm going to let it stand as it is. Soak it in, kids. That is the kind of rank stupidity, immorality, and appalling arrogance that gets one a fake Nobel Prize in economics. I say fake because Alfred Nobel did not create a prize for what he thought was no more useful than reading pig's entrails by the full moon, and certainly never considered a real intellectual discipline in any way. I've saved this last bit for dessert. Would you like to know where Paul Krugman made these remarks in favor of a government deciding who gets to live and who gets to die based on cost-benefit analysis? He publicly endorsed the American Operate Death Panel in February 2013 at the 6th and I Historic Synagogue in Washington, D.C. Yep, not a typo. In a Jewish house of worship in the capital of a nation that sacrificed blood and treasure to put an end to Nazi Germany, a government that excelled at death panels. Paul Krugman extolled the virtues of the central government deciding who lives and who dies based on the money available from sales taxes. Leaving aside the spectacular tastelessness demonstrated in his choice of venue for these awful remarks, the weirdest part of Krugman's sudden moment of candor is that for every other good or service in a free market economy, death rationing panels and increased taxes are not required to improve quality and decrease cost. Quite the contrary. Part of what I find utterly baffling about the pure idiocy which seems to be part of everyone who approaches healthcare is leaving basic economic principles at the entryway to the debate stage without ever referring to those core ideas ever again. On the whole, with the exception of brave people fighting to restore individuality to medicine, far too many governments love the idea of complete cradle-to-grave control over your body. Americans have been conditioned to live in this bizarre universe, and that's your future, unless we, rational adults, modify the course we are on.